Thank you all. Thanks everyone for joining us here today for a session on lobbying with Dan Auble. He's a senior researcher joining us from OpenSecrets here today. We're really excited to have you all here, and we'll wait for more people to trickle in. But as I get going with some housekeeping things and introductions, it'd be great if you all could write some information about yourselves in the chat. If you've been to these trainings before, you've probably heard the same spiel. So if you could put some information about yourself, where you're coming from, what newsroom you're coming from, or organization, what brought you to this training, what made you interested in it, any of that. And yeah, any specific questions you have. And we'll get started in a couple of minutes. But for some introductions, I'm Elizabeth Clemens. I'm the Director of Training and Enablement here at Muckrock. So with that in mind, if you have any specific workshop topics that you'd really love to have some training on, please don't hesitate to reach out, and then we can get something on the schedule that you really want to be learning about. So I'll put my email in the chat in a moment, and feel free to reach out to me whenever. But in a couple of moments, I'll pass it over to Dan, and hi, David. It's good to see you too. And then we can get going with our training. But for some housekeeping things, the training is recorded today. So if any of your colleagues are unable to make it today, they'll be able to see the recording. I'll send out the recording, which we upload to YouTube, in an email either later today or tomorrow that you can share with them. Or, if you have to hop out early, you'll be able to catch the rest of the training there. Thinking about questions, feel free to leave questions in the chat, and then Dan will address those at the end of the training session today. And so, yeah, just no worries if you want to just drop those in there. And yeah, enjoy today's training session, and I will pass it over to Dan to take it away.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Let me just share my screen real quick. Okay. All right. So I'm Dan Auble. I am a senior researcher at OpenSecrets. I've been with OpenSecrets for about over 20 years now. I've worked on several different projects, but the last 10 years or so, I've been our lobbying and revolving door expert. So today we're going to talk about lobbying, and I'll touch on some of the big picture trends and also things to keep in mind when you are covering lobbying. And then we'll go into what the resources available on OpenSecrets and the congressional disclosure sites. And then, as Elizabeth mentioned, I'll leave time at the end for some questions. Now, I'm guessing that a lot of you are somewhat familiar with OpenSecrets, but I'll give a quick intro here. We are nonpartisan, nonprofit, and our goal is to inform the public and policymakers. So we're very data focused. We're interested in accuracy and evidence because we want to be a reliable source for money and politics data. We mainly live at opensecrets.org. We have a state level site called followthemoney.org, which we are sunsetting and moving everything over to OpenSecrets. But that is currently where you can find state level lobbying data until we get it moved over. So I just wanted to mention that. We're going to talk about federal level for the most part today. But at the state level, we do have about 19 states since 2015, data going back to 2015. Not all, the reason it's such a limited amount is that not all states have to report the amount of money. So we also have registrations in the rest of the states. that that don't report money. And if you are looking at state level stuff, just keep in mind that there are 50 states and every single one of them is different in their rules and how things get disclosed and even what gets disclosed. So just keep that in mind to cover your bases if you are working with state level lobbying. But today we're going to talk mostly about federal. Um, there have actually been laws covering lobbying going back like 100 years, but the Lobbying Disclosure Act, which was passed about 30 years ago, is really the first time we got meaningful disclosure of lobbying activities. Since then, the spending trend has been, it was a long upward slope until about 2010, when it peaked and then started uh, declining again through the 2010s. But starting in about 2017, we started seeing things going up again, and that has continued up through the most recent filings, the second quarter of 2026. Uh, I would hypothesize that a lot of that has to do with the new administration. We saw a bump in 2017 and an even bigger one in 2025 when a new president from a new party came in. One reason that might be is that some policies that were non-starters before were suddenly viable. So, like an oil company maybe saw little value lobbying the Biden or Obama administration, but they maybe saw new openings with a new president. Um, so that's where we are today. Things are on an upward swing, and we'll see what happens with the midterms if that affects things at all. And of course, there's kind of a overall consolidation in the executive branch, increase in power that they have. So uh, we'll see how that affects the lobbying world. Like I said, the Lobbying Disclosure Act is the main law that covers lobbying activity in the US. There's also the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Those filings go to the Department of Justice. That's where you'll find them. That's for foreign entities. Largely, it consists of like uh, actual governments of other countries, um, political parties from other countries, anybody undertaking any kind of influence activity in the U.S. will have to file that. It's very broad, so it's not just lobbying. It also includes like trade promotion and um, not actual business activities, but promoting the businesses in Korea, for instance. Korea will file. The nice thing is if the organization you're interested in does file under FARA, there's a lot more information and detailed information in those than in LDA, including like dates of meetings and copies of, their efforts to get op-eds published and all that kind of stuff. So if something you're looking at is in FARA, it's a little bit of a lucky break because you might have some more information. But who files under LDA and what's in there is what we'll focus on. Companies make up the vast majority of the spending and the number of organizations that file. I should say foreign companies have the option to file under FARA or LDA. Most of them pick LDA because it's easier. Um, So LDA is a pretty comprehensive place to look for companies. But also, trade groups have come to be some of the biggest spenders. Pharma and the realtors and the American Hospital Association, those are all like top 10 spending organizations. As far as um, what is the definition of lobbying under LDA, it mainly consists of contacting the government to try and exert influence over policymaking and to spend money doing that. So if you're hiring somebody, whether it's a lobbying firm or hiring a person to be on your payroll to do the lobbying, and you're making multiple contacts with government, you'll need to file under LDA. And uh, to say a little bit about what that doesn't cover, of course, your average citizen calling their congressional office to give their opinion is not something that requires filing. Um, a lot of advertising and grassroots lobbying is pretty much not included in here. Grassroots lobbying being like encouraging your employees or the members of your organization or your customers to contact Congress or to take an action. So, like the National Rifle Association, you would probably be surprised at how small their lobbying spending is. But that's largely because a lot of the influence that they exert involves getting their members to vote for certain people or to call their Congress members. Um, and in addition to like advertising not being included, like the modern lobbying campaign is going to be a holistic effort, really, that includes media strategies and social media strategies, all in addition to having lawyers walk the halls of Congress. So that's some of the stuff that's not included. I should also just make clear the distinction between lobbying and campaign contributions, which OpenSecrets also covers. Um, when we talk about lobbying, it doesn't include those contributions, but the organizations that are lobbying may also be making campaign contributions, especially through a political action committee. Often the lobbying team or the government affairs office of a company is the one directing where those contributions from a political action committee go. So they are linked, but they are definitely distinct types of political activity. But yeah, so one thing to note is there are no limits on lobbying spending. Since this money is not actually going to a government official or a campaign the way a campaign contribution would, they can really spend as much as they want on it. And total in 2025, the total lobbying spending was over $5 billion. And some of the bigger organizations spend $100 million. So let's get into what you're actually going to be able to find when you work with lobbying disclosures. They will include who's spending the money trying to get a policy or a rule or changed or legislation passed, who they hired, whether that's a lobbying firm or an individual, we like even if they hire a lobbying firm, we find out what individuals worked on their account primarily. Uh, they will also include the topics they covered. So issues, there's a predetermined list of about 90 issue areas, broad issue areas like taxes or Medicare, um, that get reported. But then they also are supposed to include a text description with a lot more detail of exactly what they're working on. And that's like where we find them mentioning bill numbers and that kind of thing. They also have to give a little bit of information about who they contact, which part of the government. Unfortunately, for congressional lobbying, they are only required to say, we talked to the Senate or we contacted the House. And so we don't find out what committee staff they talked to or actual members, offices they contacted. But they also report executive branch lobbying. So you'll find listed executive agencies and offices, which can be nice just to tell you, for instance, allow you to say, we know that in the second quarter of 2025, when this debate over uh, gas petroleum exploration happened, Exxon talked to the Department of Energy, according to their lobbying reports. So that can be good information to use. These, if you, they may be a little small to really even see, but this is just um, the report that comes into the Senate. It's actually electronic now, but this has all the information, which we translate to make more digestible. This is telling you who filed and who they worked for and how much money. And then this one shows a little bit more about what I was describing with like the blocks of text and lists of names that are a little harder to interpret, but hopefully Open Secrets can help with that. Um, there are new and improved OpenSecrets.org. We just a couple of weeks ago um, launched a new version of the lobbying website. Sorry. For lobbying and put new data on it just yesterday. So I'm going to walk you through some of that stuff. Um, this, like the landing page where you first get to for lobbying, which from the Open Secrets homepage, you'll want to look at lobbying and groups. And then lobbying overview is the main way in there. We also have, I discussed the Foreign Agents Registration Watch or Act, which we refer to as Foreign Lobby Watch, where you can search those reports as well. But this lobbying overview will take you to the lobbying section, of course. I'm not going to talk too much about these overview pages so that we can dig a little deeper in the time we have. But they do include kind of aggregated spending for clients and firms and contracts. I mean, issues that were worked on, the bills, and we'll give you some context of like what's getting the most attention. Also, you can access the search here, which is like a unified search so that you can search clients and bills and issues and industries all from this one box, and then navigate where you need to be from there. So this is the top clients list, which uh, which will show you who spent the most money this so far. The Chamber of Commerce in 2026, the first half of 2026, has reported spending the most. And I can tell you the top three or four of these don't, they switch spots but don't change very much, at least in the last 5 or 10 years. General Motors is kind of new to the game. They had a big quarter. Um, but you'll notice a lot of them are trade associations, like I mentioned earlier. And clicking on any of these names will take you to a client profile, which again, this we first show a summary, and the very top thing is so that you can get an idea of like their historical spending. Sometimes you can see trends here, like this is for the chamber, but for instance, if we were to look at Meta or Facebook, you would see a very quick upward trend, like that they didn't exist 15 years ago, and now they are, in fact, like one of the top 10 spenders and have a very sophisticated lobbying team in Washington. You could also, like, if you were looking at the agriculture industry, you could look at this aggregated spending chart and tell when the farm bill, which years the farm bill was discussed or up for renewal, because there are spikes in those years. So, and there are other, we're just the summary, some of the new things we added with the redesign are meant to give you some context. So you'll find things like, um, what for firms, for instance, like, so this actually shows you, there we go, kind of how the firms rank in terms of how much they're getting paid by the Chamber of Commerce. So at a glance, you can tell Aiken Gump is, a big, um, is one of the main firms that the chamber is giving the most money to. Whereas like Greenberg Traurig here, that's going the other direction, is below the median, or getting less money than you would expect. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of which are the most important players to the chamber. And there's another one I wanted to touch on. So this is just like all the firms when they first started working with the chamber, um, some trend information on how much they've made over the years. Um, and we have lobbyists as a separate page. So this will get into the individual lobbyists that reported working for the chamber. The most one thing I like here is that you can filter really quickly for who has been through the revolving door. And in addition, like if they employ ex-congressmen as lobbyists, you can see those names really quickly. And we also give a visual um, version of that with these colorful tags over here, so you can get an idea of who's been through the revolving door and who hasn't, which we also show in aggregate here. But um, so here you can see and search if you're looking for a certain individual. You can filter this table. Let's move on to issues, which I think is getting into the more interesting stuff. Uh, so this page is just ranking how often the chamber lists certain issues. These are like those predetermined ones that I mentioned earlier. So they're very broad, but um, this does gives you an idea that like the chamber works a lot on litigation and fighting against really like civil um, lawsuits that they think are excessive. Uh, and not many other groups have torts as their top issue. So this can be interesting just to get kind of a broad idea of what they're working on. Uh, the agency stuff is which parts of the government they're contacting. Again, here you can look at all the parts of the government they listed. You're just it's going to be mostly executive branch stuff. Over 90% of reports re, uh, disclose having lobbied the Senate and the House. So you can almost take that as a given, but the executive branch stuff can be interesting. We also pull out of that text description the bill numbers so that we can tell exactly what legislation people are working on. Uh, it's hard to um, it's hard to quantify how much interest each bill has. So what this reports number is showing is like how many of all the reports that they and their lobbying firms filed mentioned this bill. So, for instance, this HR 1109, they're obviously mentioning on almost every report. And in all these cases, clicking on a name or a bill number or an issue from these lists will take you to a profile for that. Like I've spent most of the time on a client profile, but a, a lobbying firm profile will have a lot of the same information, or the industry profile. It's going to show, who the companies are that make up that industry or lobbied on that issue, the individual lobbyists and firms, what issues that industry tends to focus on, that kind of thing. But I'm going to take you to a bill profile as well, because these, I think, one of the most important things you can find from lobbying is here. So this is everybody who lobbied on HR 1109. Okay, great. And the Chamber of Commerce seems to do it more often than some of the other people. But this little plus here, if you click on that, it will expand to show you all of those text descriptions of their issues where they mentioned this bill. And this is useful because this can give you a lot more context about what they're working on. Like in a lot of cases here, they're just listing names of bills, but they will sometimes um, add in something more specific that they're, in this case, they're especially concerned with third party litigation funding, and you'll find that term in several of their reports. Uh, like they don't formally say whether they're in favor of or against legislation in these reports, but sometimes you can get an idea of that from the way they describe their activity in these specific issue sections. So I think this can be really useful if you're looking at a bill or a topic. And of course, it's not just the chamber. Anyone on this list, you can see how they're describing their work on this bill. It is self-reported and self-policed. So, uh, sometimes you'll see these that would just all it says is third-party litigation. But for the most part, we get a little more detail than that, and sometimes you'll just find a lot more. And of course, we have information on who's sponsoring, and again, like individual lobbyists and the firms that are working on these bills. And one nice thing to further plug this specific issue information is that you can find this on the congressional site, but you will have to click through a dozen reports and search out this specific section, and they don't identify the specific bills the way we do. So I think that's really something that we do well and can offer that others don't. Let's take a quick look at an industry profile as well. So these are going to look similar to the other profiles. You'll notice all of the 2026 numbers are going to look down, but that is because we only have half the year. One thing to consider when you're reporting on lobbying is the delay in reporting on these. So just a week or two ago, we got the information that covered April through June. So nothing's getting disclosed about what's happening today until October. So you want to notice that now. Around deadlines, we'll be updating. We have an activity page that shows new reports, which most of the time is registrations. So new, that like when a company hires a new lobbying firm, they file more immediately than quarterly. So those will be on there coming as they come in. And then around a quarterly deadline, we'll pick up the pace of how often we update it so that you can look at filings as they come in, the quarterly filings as they come in, even before we've had a chance to process the whole data set and update the website. And a lot of these, like the tables on here, are downloadable so that you can grab the figures and work with them in Excel or whatever your program of choice is. These industry profiles show you, of course, the companies that make up an industry, whether their subsidiaries are filing. Like in this case, it's mostly not subsidiaries, but there are cases where you can find out in more detail which part of the company is doing the lobbying, which can be useful. Um, we'll just mention, as I think you probably know, that we have lots of other stuff. I mentioned campaign finance. So we have a lot of stuff about elections and candidates and industries across money and politics, not just lobbying. And we do a little bit of reporting on for OpenSecrets that will sometimes surface interesting things that you might want to look at more closely. And that was kind of a whirlwind, but if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Dan. Um, yeah, if anyone has any questions, we're a small enough group. So if anyone's comfortable unmuting and asking, it's totally fine. But also, if you'd rather throw questions in the chat, I see some questions in here from earlier in this. Oh, Taylor, you can go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a variety of questions. Thank you very much for this. Um, one question I had coming into this is if you could just kind of speak very generally about when a company has an in-house lobbyist versus hiring a firm. Like, is there anything qualitatively different? Like, what are they going for when they have their own government affairs staff versus hiring these firms that from what I understand, have multiple clients, and Lockheed Martin is one of them. Um, and a second one is just to understand, under the Lobbying Disclosure Act, is there some sort of like set number of categories you have to check? Is that how you guys come up with the figure of like, lobbyists, this amount of money was spent on lobbying on behalf of defense, or this amount of money was spent on behalf of pharmaceutical? Like, are the categories generated from lobbyists' own self-disclosures and their own checking a box, I guess?
No, the industry numbers specifically are another thing that we spend a lot of our time on. An effort is identifying uh, what industry a company that we've never seen before belongs in, for the purpose of being able to talk about the pharmaceutical industry as a whole.
Right.
So that's something we do. When they register, they do say a few words about what type of company they are, and we often refer to that, but um, that's an OpenSecrets add-on.
Okay.
As far as in-house versus contract hiring law firms, there's not a lot of difference. It can, the bigger companies and organizations are almost always going to have an in-house team where they can very closely come up with the strategy um, and determine that kind of thing for themselves. They may hire outside firms because they have specific expertise or personnel. So they may have an in-house team, but all of a sudden a tech company needs to lobby on some health insurance thing, and so they hire a firm that has people that know about that, um, or who have a lobbyist who used to work on the um, health committee or whatever. So, and we see different strategies. Some companies are going to hire one big firm, and that's pretty much how they do it. There's others that will, give less money to a bunch of different firms, and that's some of that graphic that I showed with the median spending to each firm. Uh, on the firm profiles, you'll see something similar that will give you kind of an idea of whether they get big contracts or are hired by a bunch of groups. So it kind of depends on the strategy of the company, that what they decide on.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Either in, okay, yeah, I see 404 in the chat. David, thanks for addressing that.
Working on that.
Any other questions anyone wants to unmute for, throw in the chat?
Um, I will throw out another one. Um, I'm interested in these in state level lobbyists, which was the crux of a recent story I published in a project we're working on with Sunlight. Um, are there is there overlap where somebody who's registered at the federal level is also registered at the state level? Do those tend to be separate or yeah.
So the organizations spending the money, there is some overlap, but the firms not and personnel not so much. Like this is a few years ago, we actually did a study looking at this, and we specifically looked at, I believe it was pharma, the pharmaceutical trade group, um, and they were present in a bunch of states, and their lobbyists would give testimony, for instance, that was uh, very similar, sometimes word for word, even in different states. Uh, but the like our analysis found that they tend to hire state level firms. People again, like they're deciding who has the expertise and connections that they need, and I think in the states often that's a specific um, skill, not a general
Right.
lobbying thing. So um, yeah, it is interesting that especially some of the bigger ones will operate in different states, but for the most part, the lobbyists are
Right.
don't overlap too much.
Right. Thank you.
And we have a question in the chat from Eileen. Can you talk a bit more about OpenSecrets processes for building these databases? Just curious on the technical component, what steps are automated, etc.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I'm um, not on the tech side, so my understanding of it may be limited, but the basic answer is that the Senate, we use the Senate. Identical reports are filed with the House and the Senate separately. Um, and we use the Senate uh, for no particular reason other than we've been using them for years, so we're already set up. But they provide an API of this data, and we grab that and do some processing. A lot of what we do that's not automatic. Some of the like standardizing things and making sure that when a report comes in that says ExxonMobil and another report comes in that says Exxon Corp or Exxon Space Mobile or Exxon comma Inc. So they're not immediately obvious to be the same organization. We do a lot of cleanup of that kind of thing so that we can give an accurate total of what the company as a whole is spending. And some of that is increasingly automated, um, but we do a little bit of manual checking of that. Same thing for like the individual lobbyists, matching them up with their previous work uh, is a big thing that we add on, and monitoring for things like when people change their name, they don't really have to point that out to us. So we're always looking for things like that to clean up. And then, as I talked about before, the industry information is something we're constantly working on, uh, doing a little bit of research into new companies that are lobbying. And it's the similar process for campaign finance. If a new big donor shows up, we're going to look into them so that we can categorize them.
Did that answer your question, Eileen, or do you have any follow-up questions to that? Gonna take the silence as a thumbs up. Um, but I'll jump to the next question from Danielle, who asks, what federal lobbying information is included for unions? I received no hits when I tried to search for union, IBEW, and electrical worker as samples.
Uh, that is, I know there's information available for unions. I do kind of wonder, like unions are not huge players in the lobbying world, the paid lobbying world. Again, they're one that often relies on the breadth of who they represent to do some of that work. But I, what's one I know? Um, yeah, I don't know that it may be a um, peculiarity of the name. If we are using a different name, you might have to get it kind of exactly right in the search. But you can look at labor as an industry. So I would, for that particular case, I would suggest starting there, and then that will give you a list of every union that we've identified that is spending money.
Yeah, Dan, I think it might be, like you said, a peculiarity of search because I started with the International Brotherhood and it came up and I dropped the link into the chat.
Oh, great. Thank you.
It's a brand new universal search box, so we're might be debugging it a little bit as we get going with these early days of it.
Yeah, which happens.
Yeah,
Um,
and anything you see that um, we're open to feedback, I guess, is what I want to say. So um, feel free if you think something could be improved to let us know.
Sweet. And Taylor is asking if we have additional time, which we do have a bit of additional time. Could we speak a little bit about state level lobbying? Maybe any information about which states are more transparent and which are less so.
Yeah. So again, several years ago, we did a kind of scorecard on state level lobbying. Maybe if David can find it, he can drop the link for you. And we found, of course, it varies widely. Um, we found, and it depends on what your criteria are. I know, like Colorado was one of the ones that we found to be most transparent by the very specific things we were looking at, such as how easy is it to download a whole download the data as a whole, and what aspects get reported and how easy are they to search and everything. Um, but then we ended up talking to some journalists from Colorado who were like, well, behind the scenes, there's problems in the data and you know, um, the disclosure office is not very friendly, that kind of stuff as well. So there's a lot of different ways to think about who's more transparent or not. Um, but I would definitely recommend there. David dropped the link to that report, the scorecard. I would definitely take a look at that.
Yeah, this scorecard is really cool. Any other questions, comments, things that we want to explore, talk about today? Well, I'm so grateful for both of you coming on and joining us and for everyone else coming on to learn. This has been really interesting, and we're always so grateful to have open secrets and come to join us and teach us things.
We appreciate what you guys do too and the interest. Feel free to
Mhm.
contact us if you want any more specific information, or, a lot of what I do is if you're writing a story on something very specific, I can help you get kind of more granular data that suits your purposes more exactly, and just describing in more detail the things to watch out for, and all that. So feel free to contact us if you have any questions. But thank you for having us.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing this, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thanks you guys.